Gentlemen, if you will join me. Okay, I'm going to call the Interim Study Committee on House Bill 1229 to order. Thank you very much to all of you who are here, Chairman Ladd, Representative Lekas, Representative Hall, Representative Ellison, Representative Woodcock.
Here.
So Representative Woodcock and Representative Ellison, you asked for an explanation from the DOE of the school meals data figures that were given to us at the last meeting. Do you feel that you satisfactorily had your question answered?
This sheet,
Yeah.
that's a little hard to send that young lady, it was terrific.
Congratulations, you have arrived, Kelly. Okay, so what I asked that people do is to prepare themselves for the meeting by reading the research packet of information that Jennifer Ford provided us on the 5th of August so that we can take a look at where this research came from and what the impetus was behind it. So at some point in time in July, Jennifer Ford put out an email that said, probably much to her chagrin at this point, if anyone needs any research done, this would be a good time to ask for it because it's kind of quiet in the LOB right now. So through some subsequent email, I requested that Jen look at which states have similar demographics to New Hampshire. And if she wouldn't mind doing a bit of a compare and contrast between what we're doing with food services and what those other states were doing. So in particular, she looked at Delaware, Maine, New Mexico, Vermont, and West Virginia. And that's the summary of information that you have in the memo in front of you. So barring anybody feeling like they can quote page by page, I guess what we'll do is just take a look at Delaware and see whether or not there's anything of interest in that information. I, for one, was immediately taken that an RSA had been evidently drafted in Delaware that says that all public schools, including charter schools, must offer breakfast through an alternative service model. So, as we all know, the use of that word must is exceptionally meaningful because it's not an option if it's a must. On page 2, the research goes on and looks at the state funding for food service employees in Delaware, which again was something that was an interesting concept. The state supplements up to 70% of the salaries of food service staff with funds not derived from the school lunch options. In particular, the statute reads, the salaries prescribed in this section are for school lunch manager and district managers and shall be paid from state funds. Then it goes on to talk about where the cafeteria staff, where the cooks and service people are funded from, and that states a minimum of 25% of the salary prescribed in subsection C shall be paid by the state from funds not derived from school lunch operations. So I'm only assuming, and jump in here if anybody has a different interpretation of it, I'm assuming that funding would have been a roadblock for individual districts without it being subsidized to a certain extent from the state coffers. Is that how you guys read it? Page 2, top of the page. You don't have page 2? You're kidding me. Okay, Jen?
I didn't make these original copies.
No, I know you were at lunch. You were at lunch.
Okay, 3. I'll do like 8.
Great, thank you.
I was like, what?
Well, I'll tell you, I feel a whole lot better about you as a whole because I first thought to myself, well, clearly these people have not read this page. And then I thought, well, can these people read this page? Because there's nothing, there's no feedback from either side. So, yeah, so that state funding portion has to do with subsidizing local districts, I believe. And that's, I don't think that's a foreign concept to us because we've heard about the roadblock that having to hire additional staff and food directors, et cetera, has posed for some districts. It was 70% for the food director and managers and 25% of the cost of cooks and cafeteria workers. The other thing that Delaware did, not that I'm an idiot savant on the package, but I did have page 2 in front of me until Jen took it. They required that charter schools, which evidently are also public in Delaware, provide some sort of breakfast and lunch program, at least to kids who qualify for free or reduced lunch. So I don't know how I feel about that because charter schools tend to be small. And I don't know how you would protect the confidentiality of the students if Kelly's nodding her head back there. If you have 12 kids in a classroom and 4 of them have to go get their lunch from a cafeteria or whatever, and 8 of them are brown bagging it from home. Yeah, Representative Fleekus.
Well, that actually starts on the bottom of page 1, and I notice it says all public schools, including charter schools, participating in the community eligibility provision to offer that. So the question is, do they have the option of not participating?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question. Throughout this packet, what you're going to find is that some states require that all public schools and or charter schools participate in the National School Lunch Program. But then as soon as they require it, they also allow for the opportunity to apply for waivers. So I would think that each of those individual states must have some sort of threshold, financial threshold, by which they're judging what actually presents as an undue burden on a local district. Because on the one hand, they're saying you must participate, and then on the other hand, but using myself as an example, Bedford, New Hampshire is not going to apply for a waiver and have it granted if they choose not to participate in the National Lunch Program. However, someone else's community might very well, you know, whether it's property values or the burden of the school budget on the community or whatever, they may in fact qualify. Thank you, Jen. Lucky thing you came to see us today, Jen.
President Mullins, just a question, sort of a follow-up in your commentary. we now have those, I think it's 40 schools or 30 schools. 30 or 40, I forget the exact number, somewhere between those two, that do participate in our lunch program, but yet opt out of participating in the breakfast program.
Correct.
So there has to be some, thank you, Jen. There has to be some way that they do that. You know, they have that option.
Well, I don't think it's mandatory, and certainly if the DOE wants to chime in on this, feel free to jump up at the microphone, Kel. But it's not, in these statutes, it says it's mandatory to participate in the school lunch program, and in many of the states, it's mandatory if you offer a lunch program, then you must offer breakfast.
Yeah, but not
But
here.
that's not in our current statute, so
Okay.
it's optional.
And that was something that was voted down last year.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in Maine, all public schools must participate in the National School Lunch Program, but there's an exemption for secondary schools and grades 9 through 12 in a subsection of the statute. So again, you know, I believe that the spirit of that is, in reading the statute, is to allow for communities that prove that they can sustain a program to be required to do so. But in communities where, in some of the states, it's, you know, if more than 80% of the kids in the school district qualify for free and reduced lunch, then they can in fact be waived off. But I think it goes like everything else, state by state. Maine, I did not photocopy all of the literature that Jen provided from the Maine statutes. You have them electronically in email that I sent out to you on or around August 5th or 6th, somewhere in there. It's there for you to go back and look through, because I think the language is fairly interesting and certainly will be moving forward for us. But Maine has instituted a universal no-cost school meals program. So there's, in the literature that is not here, but you do have electronically, are the fiscal statement on it. I think it was 34 million was the 34 million and change, right? Nancy's nodding her head, was the total on no-cost universal meals program. They also established something called the Meals for Students Fund, which is a non-lapsing dedicated fund within the Department of Education to provide funds for the cost to the state to pay the difference between the federal reimbursement for a free breakfast or lunch and the full price of breakfast or lunch for students that are ineligible for free or reduced. Let me say that again, because there are so many eligibles and ineligibles. When you're looking at the Universal Meals Program, there are kids that would qualify for free lunch, so schools would be reimbursed full amounts for them, the federal full amount. There are kids that are eligible for reduced cost meals, and therefore the federal government would reimburse at that rate. Then there are kids that are ineligible for free and reduced meals. That's basically everybody else. So this fund, this Meals for Student Fund, was established to come up with the funding mechanism for the state to use to fund meals for kids that are not being reimbursed from the federal government. At least that's my read on it. If you'll remember correctly, I asked Jennifer at the last meeting if she was prepared to answer any questions on this research. She would have to be a full-time expert in school meals programs nationwide to be able to answer these questions. So I think it was somewhat of an unrealistic ask, but Jen, jump in if I present anything that you take issue with. Will you jump? Okay.
If you guys have any questions, probably not able to answer right off the bat, I'm happy to dig into it and get an answer back.
Well, you may be digging for different reasons. It may not be for this study committee. You may be digging for the people that come after us. The other thing that Maine is looking at is providing summer food services, which was part of the COVID relief effort. You know, kids were getting food right through the summer. Now that New Hampshire is no longer well, the program ended as of September 30th, and we did not fill out applications to continue through any of the available means. So moving through the future, that means that summer meals, you know, would not be offered, that they would end with the school year unless other provisions had been made. In some schools qualify for summer meal programs because of the population. But again, it's that, you know, if you're hungry and your parents make $38,000 a year for a family of four, does that mean that you're ineligible to be fed? Yeah, under current law it does. So we'll have to take a look at that at some point in time. Jump in here, you guys, if you have any questions or comments to They also, Maine, look at the state of Maine. Maine is their motto the way life ought to be? Is that?
Their former model, correct. Well, they also had those signs on the highway that said "Stay alert," which I thought were pretty important as well. That was for the people from New Hampshire, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Wake up. They established a local produce fund under 20A Maine Revised Statute, the local food fund, which I think, you know, we heard from our own farm to school people last time we met. And I believe that a lot of what they were proposing through the bill that did not go through last time around, but we're likely to see again, is in Maine, it's a $5,000 per school allocation if you purchase foods from local. Theirs is very specific in the sense that it's from a farmer, a farmer's cooperative, a local food hub, a local food processor, or food service distributor. And it's only to be used to purchase foods grown or produced in Maine. It's authorized to accept public and private revenue. So again, they're looking for alternative funding sources. And it's not lapsing, so I can't imagine that it would lapse anyhow if you're talking about $5,000. But that looks to, they look to be somebody who, Maine looks to be somebody who's looks to be a state that's already putting this into action, so. All right, any questions or comments on Delaware and Maine? Representative Ellison.
A more general question, Madam Chair. Could you refresh our memory as in terms of the charge of this subcommittee and what is expected or what alternatives might be expected at the end of this?
Well, it's an interesting question because, you know, I laughed early on about the study committee to determine if we needed a study committee. It's not seeming so funny anymore. Now it seems like the study committee may be recommending that we need a continued study committee. Our charge is to basically say yes or no to recommending future legislation. We do not have to write the legislation. We can make recommendations. In fact, Chairman Ladd, who I sought some advice from at one point in time, said that, yes, that if in fact you're moving forward with a recommendation for yes, then it would be helpful to gather the committee's thoughts and talk about potential legislative areas that we might want to devote some time to. Does that answer your question?
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Chairman Ladd.
In looking at several of these, which you haven't come to yet, but including Delaware, there's a requirement that the state supplement up to 70% or the others in Delaware. Where are the dollars, and are these people that are working in this program eligible for state retirement? Are they eligible for the benefits within the school district that they're maybe working, maybe i.e. medical, dental? Those would be added costs, which would be captured in some states by the local, other states partially by the local and partially by the state. But it's something we should get a handle on as far as retirement. How's that, because that's always something that's coming to haunt us, dealing with the teacher system right now, the police, fire, community college system definitely has got an issue with that. So, yeah, that's an area which you should, if you're going to move something forward, put that as a concern. If the state's going to be working, where's the retirement and how do they qualify for retirement if they do at all?
I don't have an answer to your
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
but
Well,
I
that's an
recognize the importance of the question.
Question, Mr. Madam Chair?
Representative Woodcock?
Thank you. To follow up on Representative Ladd's comment, wouldn't their assumption, Rick, be that whatever I'm just asking, whatever the school district currently is doing for their culinary staff would continue in terms of if they pay retirement, if they pay in, why would that change?
Well, you're adding to the program. It's not something.
Will you turn your microphone on?
You're
Sir.
adding to the program by way of a state statute. And the local benefits, the packages for medical and dental and all, usually and always come from the local. So you're talking about the local having to contribute some dollars to this as well. Who's going to make the decision? The local may say, well, we'll just tie it in, but there's going to be an additional cost depending upon the type of system you've set up. Certainly the person that's employed is going to have to contribute some to it, but the locals as well.
May I follow? Yeah, through you.
Yes.
So you may have answered. I guess I'm a little confused. My thinking is, if I'm working 30 hours a week in school X right now, and as a member of the culinary staff in the kitchen, say a chef, whatever, and they're providing X amount of meals, and for 30 hours a week, and next year, the year after, they change the funding mechanism, but that's not going to change my 30 hours a week. If my hours don't expend this, there's a contract for the culinary folks and the cafeteria folks, what they already have. So if nothing's going to change except how it's funded, I don't understand why that would change the local contribution. If they don't offer dental now, they don't offer medical now, which they may, but if they don't, I mean, that would be a whole new contract.
It's
That's
just a bailiwick that I think we ought to look at.
Okay.
We're seeing that when we're looking at teacher shortages right now. Retirements come up to be an issue
Okay.
that we need to look at.
Okay.
There's a lot of different ways of doing this. Could be through contracted services.
Okay.
And that could be buried into the labor costs.
Yeah, I think.
All right. So it's a point.
I think you're both right.
Okay.
Right. I think that if additional staff is needed because we're expanding breakfasts
Right.
and the number of kids that are being fed at lunch or whatever, then we have to be mindful of whether or not there are benefit and retirement implications. If additional staff is not needed, then it shouldn't affect it.
Right. And correct. And it's nice to hear that Representative Ladd and I are both correct.
You are, you're both,
Yeah,
you're both correct.
Although we agree on many things out of here. But that being said, if the staff, Representative Mullen, that you're talking about, there is a contract in place already in these school systems. So whatever, I guess my point is, whatever they're offering now as local costs, it would only seem to me to be extended if in fact we extend the hours to add new staff for local costs.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean that they necessarily have to get a benefit, like say dental insurance, that if they aren't getting it now.
Right.
Okay, that's my point.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Representative Lakis, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say that, yes, if they're not hiring new staff, but if they are hiring new staff, that's a cost we have mandated to the local people. And are we, are we mandating they spend money without providing the money for it? And so that's the question. If all of the people, if their contract says they get medical and dental, and now they have to hire 2 more staff because we've told them they had to provide breakfast, who's paying for that additional cost that they're going to have? That's the question we have to look at.
Okay, rapidly moving on to New Mexico. Breakfast after the bell required in certain schools, namely schools that have 85% or more of their student body that is certified for free and reduced meals. Funding for breakfast after the bell, again, this is one where the state is establishing, they evidently have a pot of money. And what they've said is that the disbursements of the funding is going to be based on the percentage of kids in the building that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So your neediest buildings are going to get money first, with the idea that it's that disbursement is done on a needs basis, which is again an interesting concept, and I have more questions than answers when I read that.
Question for you on that one, Sue.
Yes, sir.
If you're looking at, for example, how we are reimbursing schools for tuition in career technical education centers, if there are more kids that are qualifying than in the previous year, of course, you're going to have to pay more for tuition, but we allocate blank $9 million a year. So the way we're allocating those tuition dollars after we pay transportation is by a prorated or a proportionate amount. We divide the number of students in. The state may say we're supposed to allocate 75% of tuition, but in fact, it's only 62%. So there is a difference there. But if I were one of those districts that had this program, and I'm on the bottom side of there where our percentage of free and reduced in the building is a smaller number, but I'm still having to serve students and have the staff there, the same staff there to cook and all that, I'd be kind of, concerned that I'm not getting any of that reimbursement because you ran out of the money in the pot. So if we go forward with a program right here, I'd like to make sure that all programs are supporting the school that has those type of students in it. It's just going to be probably a good rationale for the district to be upset if they don't receive that money and to try to get rid of the program.
Thank you. The next point out of the New Mexico research that I would draw your attention to is a point that seems to be fairly popular in a number of states, and that is providing no-cost meals, breakfast and lunch, for kids who are eligible for reduced meals. So in other words, eliminating basically the reduced meal category and just making it a free meal for anybody who qualifies for either free or reduced. And the funding for that, the department shall provide funding to each school district that administers such a program. And when calculating the amount due, if a school district or charter school has not previously had a program, the department will work with the school to determine an accurate estimate of funding for the program. That means you're going to be hiring 6 more people in your office, Kelly. But But that concept, that idea of the stigma of free and reduced meals is something that we talked about at length during the last session. And, you know, if there is a way that students who qualify can receive meals without having to have attention drawn to themselves because they're in one category or the other, depending upon what the price tag is, then I think we certainly could consider that. All right, moving on to Vermont. All public schools must participate in the National Lunch Program and the school breakfast program. No cost breakfasts and lunches for students eligible for reduced price meals. There it is again. So now that was just what I was referring to in New Mexico, and now Vermont is doing the same thing. 2022, 2023, free breakfasts and lunches for all public school students. So they extended, this law will be repealed effective July 1, 2023, but calls on the state education agency to report to the legislature no later than January 15 on the impact and status of implementation of the law with various participation data and strategies for minimizing the use of state funds. That's what I'm very interested in that. It also calls on the Joint Fiscal Office to report on possible revenue sources, including, and here comes the death of it, the expansion of sales tax, the enactment of an excise tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, and other sources of revenue not ordinarily used for general fund purposes. So, at least in the state of Vermont, it looks like they are looking at either instituting a new tax on sugary drinks or doing something to the sales tax base. Yes, sir.
And I know this is being recorded, so I'd ask you to repeat or present the last paragraph of this Vermont piece, because I find that critical.
The one that starts despite the prospective repeal?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
Despite the prospective repeal, the law includes a section declaring the legislature's intent to use information collected to identify the revenue amounts and sources necessary to establish long-term funding for universal school meals.
The review is not a diminution of the program. It's just saying, let's find another way.
Right.
Okay. And I do have a follow-up to that.
Yes, sir.
Do you know, or does Attorney Fuller know if Vermont is a annual budget or biannual budget? Rick may know, he lives over there. Rick, may I ask?
Sure,
Rick,
certainly.
is the Vermont budget annual or biannual like ours?
I believe it's annual, at least in the school district, I grant it.
I mean the state budget.
Well, if the locals are developing that annual meeting a budget, now, I don't know what the state is doing.
Okay, because they're looking at where they were repealing it and bringing it back in the same calendar year. I'm thinking it was an annual budget, where in New Hampshire, we couldn't do that because it wouldn't be.
Because it's
Okay.
biannual.
That was the
Yeah.
question. All right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think the intent of the statement
The last day.
is to indicate that even if the law is repealed, that they'll be using the feeding information to find another revenue source if they have to
keep it going.
to keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
What's the student population in Vermont? Do you have any idea? Graph-wise? Because I'm looking at the cost of this program being $29 million. But I've always been under the impression that it's almost half what we have.
Well, I can tell you, based on 2018 and 2019, our numbers, it's estimated that if we, based on the 18-19 numbers, which are the last ones that were pre-COVID, it would cost us $24,696,912.80 to feed everybody after the federal reimbursement.
Those are the eligible,
Yep.
free or reduced.
No, this is everybody.
That's it, that's all 164,000 kids.
Everybody. Yep.
And Vermont has fewer kids than we do, and yet ours is coming out at less cost. Does that mean we have a lower poverty rate than they do?
Or we might have a lower participation rate in the school meals program. You know, it's based on the number of meals served.
They're feeding everybody over
Yeah, if they're feeding everybody, then we may have a higher participation rate. We may have a lower number because we're getting more money back from the federal government. But if we got less money back, it would cost us even more.
Representative, we just can't guess that, we don't know.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, we have to base numbers on something, and what we're basing it on are the total meals that were free and reduced, the reimbursement rate on breakfast and lunch free and reduced, and then the number of regular meals served, 6,589,463. But this comes from the DOE, so if you have questions, then I would say take advantage of having the DOE with us today. If Kelly, you want to come up here?
On now?
Yeah.
Okay. Kelly Rambo from the Department of Education. So the document that Representative Mullen is speaking about, she is in fact correct in describing it. So the way that it is written out is the difference between the what the federal reimbursement, what they would pay, and then the state would pick up the difference as far as that's concerned. So also Representative Woodcock is also correct in stating that it is very hard to figure out the exact number that this would be due to the fact that we are basing the numbers in front of you off of meals that are served. So if you were to want a different number on every single student that was in the state of New Hampshire that could possibly get a meal, that would be a different number than the number that's in front of you. So the number that's in front of you is actual meals that were served in all of the child nutrition National School Lunch Program meals for 18-19. But if you're wanting a different number, that's something that I can get you as well. It might be a shocking amount to see the difference between those two, but if it's something that you're wanting, I can get that for you.
Representative Ellison?
Following along with that then, and trying to get to the shocking number, we would, if the participation rate in free and reduced price is 40% or whatever it is, 52%, you're saying if we pushed it to 100%, there would be a new figure. Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no. So the number that's in front of you is based off of the meals that were served for free, the meals that were served for reduced, and the meals that were served for paid. Something to consider and think about in the states that we're speaking about and how they're running their programs, they still need to collect. In order to get federal reimbursement, they still need to collect the application. So they still need to determine those students free, reduced, or paid. So depending on the outcome of that, that's going to be what's going to change your federal reimbursement, and that would in fact then change the state, let's call it state match or state funding.
Follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Then I guess I don't want to do a lot more calculations, but if 100% of the students in the state who are eligible for free and reduced price lunch were fed, regardless of whether they put an application in or not, what would that, I'm interested in that figure.
And I can get that for you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Representative Flikas?
Just trying to figure out the number that you have. So you looked at, am I right, not just the free and reduced lunch, but all kids who bought lunch from the school, as in that would be the meals served,
That's correct.
and the rest would have brought their lunch or whatever?
That's correct.
And so if we were to say, well, let's feed everybody, that number may change because kids who bring their lunch, if it's free, might take the free lunch. And so we would have to make a new estimation.
That's correct. And so the way that the program has run in the past, for the past 2 years, due to COVID, was there was no eligibility determination needed for that. So that's why everybody received a free lunch. Then in turn, for those meals, every school received the free federal reimbursement rate. But now that we are shifting back into the NSLP National School Lunch Program reimbursement, that's when you're going to see the free, reduced, and the paid reimbursements from the federal government.
So would we be able to get an estimate based on the last 2 years of what the basic cost per student getting lunch is, and then apply that to the earlier ones when we had more kids in school?
So I just want to make sure I understand so I get you the correct information. So you want what the free reimbursement was for last year, the free
Yeah.
reimbursement rate from
Yeah.
the federal government, and apply that to the 18-19?
Yeah, basically, what did it cost us when we were feeding everybody for free? What was the actual cost? I mean, yes, I know we got money back from the government, but what did it actually cost us to provide that per pupil? And then multiply that by the numbers from the 18-19, because those are more like the number of pupils we have.
Okay,
That make sense?
I can get you that number. So it would be, for me to get you that number for last year or for
2 years ago, maybe?
to,
Oh, no, they weren't in the building.
Oh, so it's going to be completely different. Never mind. I'm just trying
weren't
to
in the
figure out,
building.
but we know meals served, so we can figure out per pupil cost and multiply that if everybody decided to eat a free meal as opposed to bringing their lunch.
right. So we have how many meals were served for last year. And the way that it's in our system, it's free breakfast and free lunch. We don't have it separate out in free, reduced, and paid because of the way that the claims were paid out for last year for the federal reimbursement. So I can take the total amount of breakfast that was served last year. I believe I might have worked, Jen, with you on that. I'll reconfigure that and get those numbers for you. And if it's not what you're looking for, then I'll try my best to get you what you are looking for.
Just trying to get an idea of what if everybody ate lunch, what would it really cost?
Yes,
Yeah,
and I can tell you that in federal reimbursement, we have pushed out over $100 million out of our office for last year alone.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in, I mean, I know that we have, we have not tallied, but the 455,000 free breakfasts, the 65,000, what's the total number of meals served in 18-19? And then the total number of meals served last year. Just as a comparison in numbers, because I did cafeteria duty for 39 years of my life. And I believe that even if the food was free, there would be some kids that would brown bag it because they just, yeah. In fact, members of this committee have taken great joy in teasing me for being a brown bagger for the past 4 years and not availing myself of the opportunity of cafeteria dining. So I think that there would be, that there would be kids that, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that just because it's free, they're going to eat it.
And so what I can do is I can provide the total meals for, in its entirety for 18-19 between breakfast and lunch. I won't break it down for your reduced paid. And then I will do the same for 21-22. And then we can, I'll give you what the federal reimbursement rate was for free. And then we can figure out the equation from there to get the total amount.
Great. Thank you, Cal. Yes, sir. Representative Woodcock.
Yes, thank you. I don't know why Representative Hall would do that to you, keep on ridiculing you with your brown bag. But, just a question for Kelly, if I may. Is the percentage rate of youngsters that participate across the board annually in our free and reduced meals relatively similar every year? Or is there a big, is 1 year like 25%, then it's 12, or is it normally a certain number within a margin similar every year, so you could look at it that?
I'm trying to remember all of the numbers that I had pulled for the committee for last time. I would say it's within 10% up or down, give or take, and all of that information is on the web, our webpage. But as far in my capacity and my role just for this,
Sure.
I would say it's either 10% up or down.
Okay.
But I just can I ask a clarifying
No,
question
sure.
for you? Just to
If she lets you.
Most definitely.
okay.
Without hesitation.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand your question correctly. Are you asking in the entirety of the, like, let's say the United States, or just for our state in and of itself? How do we
I live in New
compare?
Hampshire. Right, I'm
Just in New Hampshire.
I know New Hampshire youngsters.
Yes, I would say give or take up or down 10%
Maximum spread.
in that range. Yes,
Okay.
for the data that we have.
Okay. May I follow up?
Yes, sir.
Does the federal rate change during the year, or once it's set, it stays that rate? I was thinking about the cost of food products across the country and internationally right now. I mean, inflation now is international. So is that rate going to change or be adjusted once it's set annually? Do they just set it and keep it regardless?
It's set annually. So the reimbursement rates normally, I'll say, would come out in July or maybe August. They were pretty late this year and they came out in August. But they normally, the rates run from July to June 30th. So for this particular year, the rate was a little bit higher than it normally was due to the act that was in place for that. So that will stay the same until the end of this school year, and then once a new school year begins, new rates will come out.
Okay. And if I may, I'd like to present just an anecdotal fact. In preparing for today's meeting, I was speaking with the family liaison in one of the schools in our district, back home, and asked about what she saw for the difference, if any, with people in the brown bags and those that don't, yada, yada, yada. And what she said was the most significant difference she saw, that was youngsters who typically were not in that breakfast lunch category were stopping to taking breakfasts to go. She said they come in all the time. We wouldn't have had breakfast, but they didn't carry it. She said this was the biggest thing she saw when the federal government came to free news, with the youngsters in the elementary school and their 4 elementary schools. Those kids would come down and eagerly take their lunch to go back in that period. That would just, before, never met any criteria and never had it. She said that's a big difference she had. So just my last, I hope, last question.
Yep.
If you were, and I know we spoke about this earlier, and Representative Ellison followed me up in understanding it again. If there was a number, if we took the number that Representative Ladd said, 164,000, I think was the number he used, of youngsters in New Hampshire, school. Is that, Rick, is that right? 164?
That's around it.
Okay, so we took that number of 164 youngsters in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire's K-12 schools right now, and assume they all qualified, and the federal system of, as Alicia talked about, signing up, or the Medicaid portion, all the options looking, if everybody signed up. Is there, can you give us a guesstimate, what, two figures, what the cost might be for the program for all 164, and more particularly, what the guesstimation may be in your best, now, for what it might cost for the state of New Hampshire, assuming all the federal reimbursements that you said come in your office came in like they should. What would it cost? What were we looking at for a number to do a Vermont, to feed all the youngsters, every youngster that comes through, that to make sure they have healthy meals to start the day and be fed at least 2 meals a day? What would that cost the state of New Hampshire? You may not have a figure at the tip of your tongue. I mean,
I am not a mathematician, that is for sure.
that's a critical figure. If you go off by 5 cents, we'll be aggravated.
So I will have to get that cost for you. But I just wanted to,
A ballpark, Kelly?
it's very difficult to get that number without having the free and reduced information, because that's the point of how we're going to get that figure that the state is going to need to pay for, and to make up that difference. So we need to have what the federal government is going to be providing, so that, I could definitely give you a number if you told me that there was 164,000 that were reduced. We can get you that number. If the federal reimbursement was going to be the reduced rate, I could do the difference between, and I could get you that number. If they were all free, then the federal government would pay for them all and it would cost you nothing. So we need to have some sort of data to be able to kind of plug and play, so to speak, to get a figure for what you're asking.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I only asked that, I'm not trying to pursue this any further than the committee may want, I don't even know what they're gonna vote. But if in fact anything comes out in legislative requests next year, there's going to be that FN number next to it. So somewhere between January and the start of session, if there's any legislation that comes there, that number is going to have to be calculated somehow. Because there will be a cost that someone's going to have to look at with the FN number of that legislation. So I'm just saying that.
No, and I understand what you're saying. It's hard to get the number without having the free and reduced information to offset the federal government cost.
May I have one more?
Yep.
Is October 31 the deadline for participation in that, or September when the kids come to school? Say for this year right now, today.
For the Department of Education, we collect that data in October.
Okay,
They can apply for free and reduce at any point in time during the school year. So there's no deadline for them to
your
apply
numbers-
for it, but we do data point collection,
Okay,
yes.
so October 31 is the end of your data point collection.
Yes,
So for the projection we're talking about, somewhere after, say, November, December-ish, somewhere at some point, DOE prior to January would have at least the number that are there this year. And you can use that as a baseline. Instead
absolutely.
of 2,000, better than something else. This data is good, and I appreciate you getting that, and no disrespect, but it's 5 years old. It's not your fault. You didn't bring COVID, but so when we go back in, you know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I'm just saying that's all.
I do think it's
Thank you.
very helpful, though, to be able to look at ratios and percentages from 2018 and 19. What percentage of kids were reduced, were free, were full fare? Because we would hope that that's at least a ballpark figure.
And that's why I was asking the percentage ratio
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question?
I wanted to
Yeah.
answer. So what I can do is I can use the eligibility from 2021, so you can have an answer before So you can have some sort of answer based off of the free, reduced, and then everybody else from the 164 that does not fit into the free or reduced would be paid. So then you'd have that cost associated with that. Does that sound
That is superb.
okay?
Thank you.
Representative Lakis.
I just wanted to comment on what you said about the number of kids grabbing lunches and picturing back when I was in school and breakfasts. I had breakfast every morning, but believe me, if I'd have been able to grab and go, it would have meant I could have slept in later. I'd have grabbed and gone.
We had to walk up and down the hill both ways, so we had a chance to sleep in.
Chairman Ladd.
Thank you very much. For the department, is there any way that we can find out in the high school all the students which are eligible? I know that I used to do it as a school principal. By looking at the elementary applications that came in, we'd also see that they had X number of students in the high school. And we gave credit for those kids, even those students very rarely in the high school brought the application back in. So if we were to add in all those youngsters that are from eligible families, I think we'd get a better number. Another thought that I've had after listening to the conversation here, that where I see this happening in Vermont right now, and I see it happening even at the high school where I have a couple high schoolers attending at St. Johnsbury Academy, which is a Vermont high school, and then some in the middle school in West Barnet. The ones in West Barnet absolutely depend upon that breakfast, even though they're capable of having it, but they usually are getting up late, trying to get on a bus, and there's probably no breakfast in them. But they get to school and there is. Would it be, but the ones that get to the academy, which has 1,000 kids in it, it's about 1/3 the size of Pinkerton, but it's a good sized school. They go right into their structured scheduled day where they have to go to all the block scheduling and they're on their way. And they very rarely have the chance to do something like this because they're traveling from 8 different communities and they time it so they just get there on time for getting into what they call it chapel, but it's basically the first assembly of the day where they give all the information about what's happening that day and then on to their classes. And they're required to be in that first session. So it would be a good idea to try to phase in a program like this, phase it in first with the grades, which I feel are really critical, and they're all critical, yes, but the elementary grades, K through 6, or even if it's a K through 8 building, to phase this program in, see how it's working, and then take the next leap to the high school. Are there any states which are phasing this type of program in rather than going whole hog like Vermont? By FY23, we appropriate these dollars and everybody's in the program.
Yeah, I don't know about states that are phasing them in. The only information that I asked for from Jennifer Four was on states that had similar demographics to New Hampshire. So there may be other states out there that are doing a whole host of things that we haven't even taken a look at. We were looking at, population, annual income, size, that kinds of. So, that would take additional research.
Yeah, and the Medicaid eligibility thing, which we've talked so much about in the past, is
Yes.
absolutely critical to this.
Yes.
It may net more students. It will net more students. We've got that data from Health and Human Services.
That's the direct certification
Yes,
program.
through
Yeah.
USDA, they're involved with this, and there are some states doing, rather than free and reduce F&R program now, they're using the Medicaid information to identify all the eligible students in the K through 12 schools.
I would just note, Representative Ladd, if I could, New Mexico requires, their statute requires funding for the breakfast after the bell for all the schools, but only elementary schools have been funded so far. So they
Yeah, so it's a
prioritize
phase.
the funding for the elementary schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one I think that it said it doesn't apply to middle and 9 through 12.
As a former high school principal, I would be reluctant to wave those youngsters off and let them phase in. They're equally hungry in the morning.
Probably need it more.
Yeah. They're hungry, right?
They're big, they're growing, especially the guys.
Other questions for Ms. Rambo? Kelly, thank you so very much for coming again and being able to review the information that you gave us.
You're welcome. I'm happy to, whatever information I can get, I'm happy to provide that.
Yeah, well, we sincerely appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the last state that we looked at was West Virginia. And you know how you have sister communities in other countries or other states? I read West Virginia and I thought, oh, these are a lot like the fine folks in New Hampshire. They require a school nutrition program, but it doesn't have to be the federal one. The West Virginia Feed to Achieve Act requires the Board of Education to establish and operate nutritional programs for breakfast and lunch. And the legislation envisions building funding through donations, contributions, payments made by individuals, communities, businesses, organizations, and parents or guardians on behalf of students. So what they're proposing is their own nutrition system that each school must provide breakfast and lunch, but they're going to basically, at least to some degree, privately funded. As I said, breakfast is required. Also part of the Virginia Code is the requirement that each county board and Department of Education establish a fund or a nonprofit foundation to accept gifts, grants, or bequests for the purpose of funding approved school meals programs. The funds may also be used, Representative Woodcock, to supply students with nutritious foods over the weekend. You and I had a conversation about the 68 Hours of Hunger program, which quite a few of our New Hampshire schools are participating in the backpack initiative, that kids go home with a backpack full of food at the end of the week so that they can get over the weekend before they're coming back to school, where many of them are having their most substantial food intake during the day.
There's no school, the school provides the alternative Monday through Friday, but they still have nothing to eat on the weekends. That's exactly right, Representative Mullen.
Right. West Virginia also has a shared table initiative. We looked into that last session. We went as far as adopting the frozen food aspect of what to do with excess foods. So we did take that step. In West Virginia, they're also looking at the health requirements through the USDA, through the county health boards, and also looking at what kinds of foods have to be are allowed to be distributed. We talked a little bit about that last time around last session, but we didn't. We had information that we were limited in what could be redistributed. But I don't know how that would apply to a privately run program. You know, if this is a privately run and privately funded program, I don't know whether or not the law would be the same. But it's an interesting concept, Representative Lakis.
Yeah, the what I've seen in a number of states, it seems like, yeah, they regulate all kinds of stuff, and even when people have had meals, you know, Sunday lunch meals or weekday meals in the park that volunteer organizations were providing, the wonderful USDA came and shut them down, and which is criminal in my book, but
certainly discouraging if you're trying to feed hungry kids, right? You hate to see them cherry picking off of their lunch trays, and then somebody who might want what Muriel isn't going to eat is denied the opportunity because Muriel's had it sitting in front of her. So, yeah, disheartening at the very least. Questions, comments?
The program which we discussed several years ago was the program in Indiana. And I'd be curious to know, that was where the leftover frozen food was taken home and distributed to the families. I'd be curious to know how that program has progressed.
New Hampshire adopted its own
Yeah, I'd
program,
be curious
right?
to see, they started before we did. and
Right,
See
right.
what they may have found out about it or anything to make it a stronger program. That'd be great for us.
Yep.
The other thing, when we talk about local produce and locally raised here, I hope we don't go to the degree that Maine has gone, and it has to be from the state of Maine. Local up my neck of the woods is both sides of the river. And in fact, most of the land now that's being farmed in New Hampshire is owned by people in Vermont. And so I would think that we'd want to have produce local by maybe some kind of a radius or New England. Yeah, there's something we want to look at. I know that Hannaford, when they're selling food in the stores now, they're calling locally raised produced food. It's from Maine, and which that's where Hannaford's out of. But they consider that still local here in where I shop over in Bradford, Vermont. I haven't seen that down in the Hannaford store in Plymouth, but I think it's important that we try to spread it out a little bit.
Okay, so that's all I have in terms of the research that Jen provided us with. At the very least, I think we have a body of information here that begs questions that would be worthwhile to answer if we can certainly get answers to the questions. On a personal note, I will say that I have found it, again, I'll go back to that word disheartening. I have found it disheartening not to be able to do something about feeding hungry kids, and I understand that we need to have federal reimbursement, obviously, to the best of our abilities. We need to be able to access the federal dollars that are out there, and whether or not we should be looking at how we go about collecting the data on free and reduced lunch kids, and whether or not there is a way that we can collect data to get higher participation from people that are actually eligible for the program. I mean, that certainly would be something that I would be interested in. Representative Woodcock.
And I would comment from the meeting we had with Representative Ladd and his committee on 1680 last week. There was clearly a lot of dialogue about how we measure achievement and standardized tests and all those things. It seems pretty clear to me that regardless how we measure, those numbers for the state, Rick, are going to go up when we have a whole cadre of youngsters in New Hampshire that are fed and get the nutrition, the meals they need every single day, that our achievement scores have to go up, and having hungry kids try to take tests.
You don't have to convince me on that.
Oh, no, I was agreeing with you. I was agreeing with you. Saying,
I'm there.
yeah, no, you brought it to light the other day.
Yeah. And my biggest concern is that I'm looking at a number of programs which we, require or have for the state has to support school districts in various tasks, like building aid. And where we have those programs, there's some ownership on the part of the locals. The state may provide 70% of a grant, and 30% has to be done locally. I think with a little ownership in the game, I think that would help. When we're talking about, $29-30 million, we're talking about the availability of the school building aid each year of being now upwards towards $25 million a year. We appropriate $50 million, but
Right.
half of that's dead.
Paid off there.
And so, and the same thing with all those types of programs. So it'd be really, I kind of concur. We shouldn't, to phase in just certain grades, that's maybe one option. To try and get it in all grades is a better option. But to do that, there have to be some optional buy-in on the part of the local saying that, and showing the benefits in marketing this program properly. And then I see, in terms of my town, which is a rural community, but one that's always been very thoughtful of social organizations when it comes to our warrant articles, they would probably be the same when it came to feeding kids.
Well, my
And so
point
we'll
was that thank you. My point was that youngsters who get a good night's rest and have a full nutritional system of meals throughout the day are going to succeed academically better than those youngsters that can't sleep at night because they're hungry or come to school hungry all day. So the numbers that we're talking in 1680 on the academic achievement of New Hampshire, clearly this is one part of that that could help. Thank you.
Representative Lekis.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention two cautions. One is in saying that a school, one of the states said that all schools must participate in the federal program. And the federal program mandates all kinds of things, including the type of food, et cetera. And if kids don't like it, they don't eat it. Look at Londonderry, they decided not to do it because the kids were not eating the food because they thought it was disgusting. And I can understand that. I remember Michelle Obama apples, and my daughter would take her Max Apple Farm apple in and say, I have an apple. I just want to buy the carton of milk. And they'd say, no, you can't buy the carton of milk unless you have a Michelle Obama apple. And the Michelle Obama apples were hard and bitter and terrible, and she had a wonderful Max apple. And so they ended up with a barrel of apples that they fed the donkeys with, because we have an ag school. And so I just want to
Because they
caution
weren't allowed to
mandating.
serve the Ronald Reagan jelly beans. Just a point.
Yeah, I'm
a
just
point.
saying, we just have to be careful when we mandate things, right? And then the other, the Ronald Reagan jelly beans, I totally forgot what my second
They
cautionary
serve cargo
point
peanuts,
was.
though, which are deadly in school too.
They
Well,
are
for some
nutritional.
students. Yeah, so it goes both ways, folks.
No, I take full responsibility for that, Representative Woodcock. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Representative Lekis.
And I do really, as you would expect, like the West Virginia way.
I think I even knew that before I brought that up, Representative Lekis.
But I don't remember what the other thing was. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, like anything else, this, we all acknowledge the fact that we have a pot of money and that the money needs to be distributed and used for different things. And at some level, we all have to decide how our priorities are ranked. And, Representative Ladd will talk about CTEs with great passion and authority. And I will talk about hungry kids in the cafeteria with equal passion. I won't say authority, though, because he probably did cafeteria duty himself when he was.
Many years.
Yeah. Representative Ellison?
Go ahead, then I'll go.
Representative Lekis.
I remembered what the other one was, and that's sharing personal data. And that was the problem with the Medicaid program, is that they were sharing data. They would be sharing data with the federal government that people didn't necessarily want shared. And given our constitutional amendment, which says, another step towards guaranteeing people's privacy, we really have to look at that before just saying, oh, we're going to do this.
That's another number that I would love to be able to get my hands on. Like, how many people, what is the percentage of people that would have difficulty sharing their personal data? We don't know. That's because, of course, they're not going to share that because they don't want to.
We are fooling ourselves thinking the federal government doesn't have that data right now. When you have an IRS is basically knows everything that's in your forms there, and we wouldn't be through this Medicaid looking for anything further than what's already possessed by them. So I think it's a process which would allow us to strengthen all our federal grants coming to this state. And we're looking at where we can get more revenue, more sources of money. We would be, look at the CTE program. That funding basically, when we're looking at the Carl Perkins grant, is based on part of the FNR eligibility. And that it goes down through all of the ESSER stuff as well. So I think we should be open to looking at every avenue of revenue for this state to function on. So I kind of disagree a little bit with that. I think the feds already have that information.
Representative Ellison.
Just two quick comments. One based on our latest discussion, and I was on that it was an informal study committee that Rick set up, and we went through looking at sort of free and reduced price, the issues we're talking about. What are the numbers? How can we improve them? And I think, and I think I'm right, that there were 4 or 5 states who had figured out how to use Medicaid data in order to vastly increase the number of students who were eligible for free and reduced price lunch. So I'm not in the camp of saying, well, we got privacy issues here, so no state should do it, because some states are doing it. Secondly, just in terms of the work that we've done and we're going to do, there are a whole lot of issues that that need to be studied. But I, for one, need to see action on this. Kids have to be fed. I do not want to spend however many years I have left in this body studying this issue. We need to move quickly. We need to get questions answered, and I think that's what's happening. And Madam Chair, I would congratulate you on moving us through this process very rapidly. But my patience has run out on this one.
President Mullen, do you need if you're willing to entertain, are you at the point in your deliberations and you're thinking that you're willing to entertain a motion to take a vote of this committee to see if we want to continue the study and bring forward a positive affirmation to the committee for the or not, or where are we in that process? I know you started with that's the culmination.
Right,
I'm
right.
thinking we're ready to culminate.
Well, I had originally indicated that I thought today would be our last meeting day, just because I felt like we had heard a lot of information from the public and our own agencies, and that once we reviewed this well-done research, that we would make a decision. So I don't know how individual members feel about making that determination today. I certainly would want to hear from you about that.
Would it be possible for you to restate the frame as you did when we began discussion today about what vote is needed for affirmative or negative for this?
I am going to say it, and then I'm going to ask that the man who knows more about how this works, if I say anything that is untoward or out of line, please let me know. I believe that our charge today, based on the fact that we are an interim study committee on House Bill 1229, which was a bill to establish a study committee on food service programs. I believe that what the question we're answering is whether or not we feel that additional legislation related to House Bill 1229 is appropriate or not.
Let me read the title of that bill because you're very close to what it said. 1229, establishing a committee to study school meal programs in New Hampshire public schools and non-sectarian schools that accept public funds. So it's to establish a committee. Now, what we had in the blurb on this was the Education Committee has been approached this year with several bills that request we study what food programs schools are using and what programs are not working. We have been approached with bills that want to explore how Granite State students can take advantage of our natural resources in the farms that will benefit the students nutritionally and our farmers financially. Some questions revolve around whether local resources can alleviate supply chain issues and whether we can rely on them systematically. For these reasons and more, we need to decide on a preliminary structure of how to study these topics. My understanding of where we are in commissions and committees, that we have enough commissions and committees, I think it's time to say we feel that there's no need to kick this can down the road further, that there's no need for additional study or a committee. We need to bring forward legislation of some kind to address the issue of hunger in schools. And with some snippets that you've taken from your committee here. So basically, there's no need for this bill to go forward. This bill is a committee study. We've just done that. And we've studied a lot of this over the years, and we have DOE here that's able to provide the information. We have research assistant Gen 4 here also. I think you're at the point where you want to bring some legislation forward based upon some of the discussions you've had, be it with West Virginia, Virginia, Maine, Delaware, et cetera.
So the answer to the question would be, no, we do not need additional study. We feel that additional legislation is warranted in the
Yeah.
following
The
areas.
purpose of the study has been met by this subcommittee. Now we feel it's now to take that next step forward with creative legislation that's going to, meet some of these goals which we have. So you ought to come up with some general aspirations that this committee really wants to see.
Yeah,
And so that should be spoken to, if you're going to take that vein, then you want to really try to speak a little bit too. So you don't have to. It could be just brought forward. It'd be nice to keep it all on the same page though.
yeah, the only thing I'm thinking about is whether or not that can be done, whether or not I can put something together and circulate it, or whether or not we have to have another meeting.
You could always, put together some bullets or whatever right now, or in a interim period here, we have till the 24th. You could meet early just before the committee of the whole meets to take exacting these bills and possibly look at that, distribute this by way of, email to everybody, and then come back in and ask people that if any comments on one, just strike it and modify it a little bit or whatever.
Yeah.
Then try to come in and get it done. I don't think there's need for any more study on this thing. I really
Okay.
don't.
All right, then I will be looking for a motion from somebody I am looking for a motion made that there is no further need for additional study. And the following recommendations are being offered by the committee.
I think Lieutenant Ellison was making that motion, actually.
No, I think Representative Lekas beat him to it. So you are making the motion.
I move that we recommend that there is no need for a study committee, that the work has been done already during our interim study, and that instead we recommend that legislation be put forward in the following areas to be filled out and agreed upon during the next week or two.
Okay, do I have a second? Representative Ellison, you second the motion? Okay. So with that in mind, then I will ask for a vote on the motion. And I'm just going to go from right to left. Representative Woodcock.
Yes.
Representative Ellison. Representative Hall. Representative Lekas.
Yes.
And I am also a voting member, and I am a yes. No, Chairman Ladd is
I'm
not a member of the
on your
committee. He is
subcommittee.
advisory only.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, so the motion passes anyhow. Yes.
I just wanted to pass on one piece of information I got since our last meeting about the farm to school program. When I was last buying my vegetables at our local farm stand, I mentioned that we were working on that, and he said, and he just almost shouted it, "That won't work in New Hampshire." And I was kind of taken back. I'm like, what? He said, Alvernon approached them years ago, and they spent about 3 years trying to figure out how to make it work. He said, the problem is, we're about done with our harvest about the time school starts. And so maybe they can provide things for September, October, and that's it. And so they did work. He said, we worked really hard for like 3 or 4 years trying to make it work. And that's in the southern part of the south central part of the state where the weather is a little better than up north. And I know other farms that I know of in the state, they're pretty much in the same, I mean, you have meat farms that could provide meat for freezers or whatever. But yeah, the squash is about the end of the season. Squash and apples.
Representative Hall.
I would say we grew potatoes up north, and they were year-round. We had them right in our basement, and we sold them to the school year-round. So there are some products that are year-round.
And,
Representative Ellison.
and I would suggest apples may fall into that category, correct?
Yeah.
Add those carrots.
Representative Woodcock, did you have something?
I had two things. One, I'd add carrots to that because I still buy them from our local farm in January, February, March. But in all seriousness, Representative Mullen, I want to thank you for the diligence that you put in this committee to make sure we all had the information we needed, and Jennifer for her work. This has been a pleasure to serve on this with you, and I appreciate your leadership.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. It's, as I said, near and dear to my heart. Hungry kids, we've got work to do.
Don't give up on the locally grown stuff either. Up in Grafton County, we have a Grafton County farm, which provides the produce for the Grafton County nursing home. And it offsets the costs of food in that particular county operation. We also have the food pantry in Woodsville, which we get donations from local stores, be it Shaw's or Hannaford, and that's distributed to those that are in need within the community, not to the schools. But there's no reason why programs like this can't be also helping schools. If we look at the season and we look at, what the availability of what produce or crop is there, but there are a number of small locally operated operations here in the state. I know the commissioner came here, Representative Jasper, and he said, well, sustainability is a major issue that you speak to, Representative Lakes. And I agree, but I wouldn't say that's enough rationale to stop and not really pursue this. I continue to pursue it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I am interested, before you all go dashing out the door, if you would like to speak to me about what sort of recommendations you would like to go into this report. We can do one of two things. I can either take your suggestions now and we can continue to meet, or you can email me, having digested this information. But I would ask that you email me within the next couple of days or so that I can get this done with any recommendations that resonated with you from all of our discussions. And I will try to put something together. Yes, Representative Hall.
I just wonder about how we can capture these folks that aren't on the record as being free and reduced, but they really are. I mean, so that for me is like, how do we get those folks? Because I think
We used to refer to those as the fourth stay-nine kids when I was in school, that if you were in 1, 2, and 3, you got loads of services, and if you were gifted and talented, you got services. But yeah, if you're slightly above that eligibility criteria, or if you're eligible, but you don't have, your family doesn't have the wherewithal to know how to apply or when to apply, or, yes.
I would go beyond that. So I'm talking about the ones that would certainly qualify. I know for myself personally, the cafeteria woman, when I would go to lunch, she'd say, I don't know why your parents don't, with 14 children, why you don't have.
Can we ask
free
you a
lunch,
question?
Sure.
You know?
And following up what Representative Hall is saying,
I just, Representative Vlad, I want to give Representative Hall an opportunity to finish.
Okay, so it was, why aren't you? And it wasn't they didn't have the wherewithal. It was just.
They chose not to.
The pride and whatnot. And so I think that there are people in that category, I'm guessing. So how do we catch them?
so when I was a principal, and I'm sure Representative Woodcock, you've done the same thing, you knew that there were some kids which were eligible that were not bringing this into school for either the upper levels of middle school or high school. Mm-hmm. But we checked them off as receiving that. We used our ability to make an exception by allowing this student to qualify. We qualified them. the administrators, all the principals in the district got together and we went through all these applications every October. So is that something that's done still today? Is it legal or what?
That is not done today. There are certain circumstances that it could be, depending upon the situation. But in the way that you're describing it, it would not happen in that way.
So if we had an application from Susan Jones down in the 6th grade, and the parent said, you know, we also have Johnny and Ralph and et cetera in our family in the other grades, that wouldn't suffice?
No, that's a different situation. So the families now only have to fill out one application. They can include everybody on that application. So they would be all encumbrance of whoever is in the household. And it's a local level, at the Department of Education. We don't have anything to do with that determination and eligibility. That's done at a local level. So it's in fact the nutrition directors that are the ones that are doing that. Again, due to, you know, data privacy and privacy of those people that fill out those applications, that's something that's very taken very seriously at the,
Is
at
this
the
a
local
state
level.
application?
No, it's a USDA
It's
application.
USDA. Does on that application, does it say, please fill out all children within your family on that individual application? Or does it say, it's coming from elementary school X, so you are filling out as a parent the kids which are attending elementary X school, not including your other children,
In the instructions, it lists all household members.
all household members.
And that's part of, just to finish, that's just part of the packet that goes to every single student at the beginning of every single school year. That's a USDA requirement, printed out and handed to every single student.
Representative Ladd, if we had an Office of School Counseling at the Department of Education, that person would be able to tell you that it is a school counselor's purview to reach out to families, to be in touch with families, to and or a school social worker if they're in existence.
I would agree, but I also agree as a principal and an assistant principal in your building, we laid it on ourselves to get that done. And it didn't have to be necessarily the counselor, or it could be anybody in administration doing it. And we did make those contacts. But it would be nice if they, instead of saying just all household members, including children.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that,
I also think too that, you know, the stigma and shame of hunger is huge. It is huge. I know staff members in buildings that are hesitant to address a family, a parent, you know, they've got kids in their classrooms that are hungry and they're hesitant because they don't want to make the parent feel uncomfortable or have the parent think that somehow or another there's judgment involved. But no kid, you know, no family, no child should feel shame over hunger. Yes, Representative Woodcock.
Thank you. I was under the misnomer when we were talking with Representative Ladd's other committee about Medicaid and helping the large applications, all youngsters are included. I was still thinking that we were losing youngsters in the upper levels because they weren't included. Can you tell me what year we changed that? I mean, I was really on the wrong information, that all youngsters were included under one application.
As long as I have been in child nutrition, this will be my 11th year, they have always been on the application.
Wow. And they're approved on one application.
Yes, the family can fill out one application.
Great. So I had that misinformation in my brain. Thank you. No, terrific.
And the local level, you know, it's a best practice and that they make that connection and look in their system to make sure that
Yeah.
they're
Yeah, no,
connecting
it's great.
those two together. And the way the application is separated out, students are at the top. You can identify what school they're at. And there's different criteria in that, and that's when the bottom is
that's true.
where the parents are, parents, guardians, they're
So,
identified.
follow up to that. So when a student is attending Woodsville High School, who is from Bath, New Hampshire, that's a separate school district within the school administrative district, the school administrative union. And does Bath then contact Woodsville High School or the central office for SAU 23 that this kid in Bath, along with those other students which are attending your high school there in Woodsville, are eligible? Or is that something that's just kept at Bath and we miss out on that child that's maybe attending, the older one that's attending the high school? That's on that other application that comes in at Bath.
I can't speak particularly to that situation. I'd have to look at the SAU to find out the makeup of, do they have one nutrition director? Do they, I would like to say I'm fluent in all of the SAUs, but in my 10
They
months
have
here.
one director right there in North Haverhill.
Okay.
And so and she has quite a burden trying to collect money that's owed to them, and on it goes. But I was just hoping we're counting all the kids, and even from those sending communities like Benton and Bath and Warren and Piermont, all those communities, we want to catch them all.
And the applications, although they're done at the local school
District,
they are collected at the SAU level. So that would be fully captured at the SAU level, because there's certain steps that need to be done as per the USDA on verification of the applications and so on and so forth. So that's done at an SAU level and not at a district level.
Thank you.
Other questions for Representative Lickes?
Just to comment to all these brilliant brains here, we need to be trying to thinking outside the box and see if there's another way of figuring out needy students other than free and reduced lunch or needs in a community or whatever, because we base everything on free and reduced lunch. And then when we don't get applications filled out or whatever, we don't get it. So we need to be trying to, I don't know, see if there's some totally different way we haven't looked at yet
Yep.
to figure out where needs are and where they aren't, because free and reduced lunch has
Yeah.
issues.
I would agree with you. It's just that so much funding is attached to the data for free and reduced lunch. While we're thinking outside the box, I think we got to do a better job at collecting numbers too. So, Kelly, can I ask you a question? In your office, it's the Office of School Nutrition. Is that what you're?
Yes, nutrition programs and services.
Okay, all right. How many people are working in that office?
Currently, right now, we have 6.
Okay,
And that is encumbrance of not only National School Lunch, so we handle the child and adult care programs, summer programs, fresh fruit and vegetable program, special milk program. So all of the child nutrition programs that are funded by the USDA are out of my office.
if I were evil, I would ask you whether or not you think that you have adequate staffing in your office, but I don't know that you could probably answer that question.
I appreciate not asking that question.
Well, I just want you to know I'm thinking it.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think she's a volunteer next year, Kelly.
I'm sorry, say that?
She's a volunteer next year.
Yes, I would agree.
Representative Hall.
I was just going to follow up on an earlier statement that I made. I want to make clear that I did not go to school hungry, and our family was probably the best fed family in town, living on a farm. So I didn't want to suggest that I went to school hungry, because I definitely did not.
Representative Lickes.
So I have a question. You deal with fresh fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And the program we were talking about, Farm to School, had an administrator and testing, just all kind, tracking food and all kinds of stuff. if we were to, and that seemed like it was gonna spend a chunk of the available money on overhead and administration. So the question is, I guess if we had a volunteer program, the schools with the local farms, would we need administration at your level, and would you be able to do, help out with that, with the people and funding that you have now?
With the current funding,
With the current people that you have, the funding for your employees, and with the current staff that you have now, as far as just helping schools make arrangements if they want to do it, if things have to be done.
I would have to say no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just a reminder that you're going to email me with potential suggestions for legislation or areas of study or investigation or whatever, however you want to phrase it. Thank you very much. And I will put something together, and then I would assume that we're probably going to do what Representative Ladd had suggested, and that is meet ever so briefly on the morning of the 24th before the meeting begins. We're here for a full day. I'm not sure what time we're coming in that day.
We start, I think, at 9:30. I have another meeting starting up a work DOE at 1 o'clock, so I'm hoping to get things done in the morning.
Right.
So you're gonna have, if you're gonna meet briefly before
Yep.
the meeting, you should put it in the calendar.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be, a sub.
Would you all be able to meet at 9?
You have to take all my information.
Yep.
Unless it to follow what we agreed to.
Yep.
Let people give you a straw, yes, we concur, and then boom, we're not gonna be here all day.
I'm just procedurally, I'm just wondering whether or not it has to be a meeting that can be witnessed, whether it has to be a public meeting. So,
You could do it in 2 minutes.
yeah. So if you're,
Yeah, I'd put 9:15.
We could do 9:15.
And 7 a.m.
all right, 9:15, Jen, would you mind asking Lindsay if she'll notice that? And then I will make sure that you folks have the document ahead of time, but we will just, for the sake of public record, be able to read it into.
Do you know if on that day, all the committees in the building meeting?
All, here, in other,
Oh, yeah, are all the committees having something on that day?
no,
Okay, so I guess my question, Sue, is, and just for expediting the issue, if you could have the meeting in another room, since Rick's meeting at 9:30, people will be assembling while we're trying to do the stuff, if you could just, let me work more efficiently.
Yeah. Not a horrible idea, just trying to follow procedure so that we're legit. That's all. So Jen, for my edification, would you set that meeting at 9? And, yeah, and that way if people get stuck in traffic, if there's, so we'll meet at 9 on the 24th. And that way we'll be, sorry about that, Representative Woodcock, we'll be as gentle as we possibly can be if you're late. Yes, Representative Fleckus.
So beforehand, we can be putting comments in, saying, no, please change, no, I don't, et cetera, so that pretty much by the time we're done with our document, we're ready to go. Got it.
We adjourn this meeting.
I second that. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming in today, and I will see some of you next week and others on the 24th.